All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the Everyday Judaism podcast. We are now in the middle of the laws of washing hands for a meal, part 2. We began last week, and we are on page 60 in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in the second volume. So page number 60, halacha, Siman number 40, halacha number 10. Mayim meluchim, with regard to water that is salty, suruchim, putrid, umarim, bitter, or achurim, or muddied waters. Im ein ru'in lishtias kelev, if they are not suitable to be drunk by a dog. Psulim lenetilas yadayim, then they are not suitable for washing netilas yadayim. Meaning they have to be good enough for you to feed your dog in order for you to be able to wash your hands with those waters. Kodem Netila, halacha number 11. Before washing netilas yadayim, tzrichim lahashgiach ala yadayim sheyiyu nikiyim. One must take care to ensure that the hands are clean. Bli shum chatzitzah, without anything stuck to the hand that would constitute a interposition between the hands and the water. So if you have a ring, take the ring off. If you have anything, a Band-Aid, take the Band-Aid off. Anything that would be a interposition between the water and the hand would be an issue. Umi shetziporne atzbiyosov gedolos, and one who has very long fingernails, sarach ledaktik lanakos, should be cautious to clean the nails, shelo yu tachtein titvitzoa, so that they not have dirt underneath them. Mishum dahavi chatzitzah, because that itself could constitute an interposition between the water and the hand. V'chein tzrichim lahosir tabos, and one should as well remove their rings from the fingers, shelo yu chatzitzah, so that they not be blocking from the water reaching the hand, the complete hand. Halacha number 12. Mi sheyadav tzavuo, someone whose hands are colored. So you are a painter. You have paint on your hand. You have a marker. You used a Sharpie, and you overran the lines, and now you have a mark on your hand. Im ein sham mamashus batzeva hatzeva, if there's no substance to the coloring, meaning it's on the skin now. It's just ink on the skin. It's not paint. Paint, you got to peel it off because it's actual substance. But the Sharpie, it'll eventually get off. But right now, you're going to be scrubbing for an hour. You're not obligated to do that because it's not something of substance. Ki im chazusa ba'alma, if it only has appearance but it doesn't have substance, lo havi chatzitzah, that is not constituting an interposition, a block between the water and the. And by the way, these halachas also apply to mikvah, right? A woman who goes to the mikvah cannot have makeup on her. She cannot have even on the nails, a manicure, to have nail polish would be also a block between the water and the body. So if there's no actual substance of the coloring on the hand, afilu rakmat, even if only a little, havi chatzitzah. So lo havi chatzitzah if there's no mamashus. But if there is actual substance, like paint, you're painting your house and you have paint now on your hand. That's actual substance. That's actually something that you're going to have to wash off and remove before you wash your hands. That would be a chatzitzah. However, imhu uman bekach, if his occupation involves handling this type of substance, dehainu shuhu tzaba, he's a painter, he's a dyer, someone who dyes shoes, dyes colors, and now they always have color on their hand. Their hands are like, or a mechanic whose hands are always greasy with oil from the car. V'chein mishu tabach, or someone who's a butcher, v'yadav meluchlachos midam, whose hands are red from blood from the butchery. Oshahu sofer, someone who's a scribe and is always involved with ink. and has ink on his fingers, and his fingers are soiled with ink or the blood or whatever it is that this is what he does, and he's used to using these materials and having them on his hands. And anybody of such occupations, they do not mind if their hands are soiled in this way, and therefore for them, lo havi chatzitzah, it is not considered an interposition, something which is blocking the water to reaching the hands. Elo im kain hu berov hayad, unless that substance is on the majority of the hand. So if it's just on the fingertips, which a scribe will have their fingertips will touch, the quill and the ink, and they're constantly, and plus they're on a parchment and they're writing. They could sometimes blotch their fingers a little bit with that ink, but now that's not the case with actual paint. So paint is an actual substance of material, of matter. And therefore, if that gets on one's fingers, you have to clean that off, even if someone is a painter. Now, because they'll have a complete coating of paint on their hand, that's not obviously going to be a chatzitzah.
So it matters if what's on your hand is permeable or not.
Right. If it's not actual substance that's under, right. Okay. V'chein, similarly, mi sheyesh lo maka al yado, someone who has a wound on his hand, v'oleo ritiya, if there's a dressing on one's hand, someone got a cut, someone got stitches, someone had some type of, or if someone has a cast on their hand, you can't take that off, right? But if someone has a dressing upon that is painful to remove, lo havi chatzitzah, that's not considered, that does not constitute an interposition. V'dinei chatzitzah b'tfilas noshim v'hu adin netilas Yadayim, that we'll see later in Siman 161 when we get there, that regarding the laws of interposition with regard to a woman's immersion, and those same halachos apply to Netilas Yadayim, as we mentioned previously. We just have like 7 or 8 more halachas in the Siman, so that we understand that when we wash our hands before we eat bread, we need to make sure that our hands are going to be clean, which is why some people wash their hands. The halacha, what you remember last week, the halacha said you have to wash your hands twice on each hand. There's some people who wash it 3 times, because the first time they're cleaning their hand, and the second 2 times they're washing their hands on their clean hands already. All right? That's so you just understand why people do it. But the halachic obligation is only to wash your hands twice. Halacha number 30. Hamayim tzrichim she'yavo al yadayim. The netilas yadayim waters must come onto the hands, mikoach gavra, with human force. So I don't know if we mentioned this previously in our class. I was just someplace last week with my family, and there was absolutely no cups to be found. We were washing in a public area. There's no washing cups. So what do you have to do? And it's all electronic faucets. So the first push of your hand in front of that sensor is the koach gavra, is the human force, but not what continues to flow after. So the first force, so you put your hand in front, okay, and you do that a couple of times, and that first spray of water is considered human force, but not the rest of it. Obviously, on Shabbos, that would be prohibited anyway, but this wasn't on a Shabbos. It was just an ordinary Monday. Aval im hamayim boim me'aleihem, but if the water comes by itself, lavi netila, that is not considered a valid washing for netilas yadayim. V'chaviz sheyesh bo barza, a barrel that has a plug, v'heisiris habarza, and now one removes that plug, thus releasing the water that is in the barrel. Azai hamayim haboim bekoach harishon dehainu kiluach harishon levado. So imagine that you have this big barrel that has water. On the bottom, it has a little faucet or a little. So the first drop that comes out, the first burst out, is from human force. After that, it's not human force already, and now it's just flowing. So the water that comes forth from the first force, that is the first stream of water only. Nechshav mikoach gavra, that is considered to have come from a human force. But the water that flows after this first burst of water, einach shavim mikoach gavra, are not considered to be human force. Elo ki ilu ba'u me'elem, it's considered as if they're just a flow of water that comes by itself. Therefore, mishu rotze lito yadav, one who wants to wash his hands, derech baraza, wants to remove the plug from a water barrel, tzorech leda, must know for sure that he has to be careful that the whole hand be washed with the first flush of water, with the first flow. And then he blocks the stream and opens it again, and that second can wash the hand again, and now he just did his hand twice. And anyone who cannot figure out how much is in that first flow should not wash his hands in such a way. Certainly one should not wash his hands from a basin that has a small plug, a small spout, because that would not be sufficient in its first bout to wash the whole hand. Because the stream will be so narrow and it'll be unable to cover the entire hand. Halacha number 14. It is forbidden to eat bread without washing netilas yadayim, without washing hands. Afilu imrotz likroch yadav b'mapa. Even if one wishes to wrap his hands in cloth so as not to touch the food, so he's not gonna, that way I'm not gonna touch my bread. If one is traveling and he has no water, if he knows so if he knows that within the next 4 miles in front of him, or 1 mile, you're traveling, you're heading to San Antonio, and there's no exits in the next 4 miles, and there's no exit 1 mile back. Right? No, you can't make a U-turn like that anyway, but either way. So then if there is within that amount, then you have to wait and make sure you find a way to wash. But if you do not have within this distance, avol im gam shama lo yimtzamayim, if you don't have accessible water within that distance, o shuhu im chaburu, or if you're traveling with a group and you can't get the whole group to guys, I got to go wash my hands so that I can eat. They're either not Jewish or they don't, they don't know. Or you're going to lose your crowd. You're going to lose your people due to the danger involved in traveling alone. Or anyone who has any unavoidable circumstance, that he cannot wash his hands. Such a person may wrap his hands with a cloth so as not, or wear a glove, and he can eat his bread without touching the bread, even without washing his hands. So, but the idea is we need to have clean hands before we touch our bread. We mentioned the spiritual side of it last week, in our episode last week, about washing away our arrogance. Here we see that we need to really have holy hands before we touch our bread. Halacha number 15. One who relieves himself before eating, which is appropriate. One should relieve themselves before they eat. Now he needs to wash his hands, as we learned previously in the Everyday Judaism podcast, that one needs to wash and recite a blessing of Asher Yatzar after relieving oneself in the restroom. But now he needs to wash for 2 reasons. He has to wash because he finished relieving himself in the bathroom, and he needs to wash his hands because he's about to sit down to eat a meal. There are several doubts about this, whether or not the blessing upon this washing, were he to wash only once for both obligations. Therefore, let's explain what is the proper way for one to the proper procedure. lechafno achas v'yishav sheif shtei yodav b'mayim elu v'yinag v'imheitev v'yivarach hashiyatzav v'achar kach yitol yodav k'din netilas yadayim l's'uda v'yivarach al netilas yadayim. He says, get your hands a little wet first. Rub your hands to clean them really well, and recite the blessing of Ashiyatz, and then appropriately wash your hands for Netilas Yadayim for your meal. Now, the halacha, and I've seen this written multiple places, that you can wash your hand just for the meal now, and that washing of the hands applies for both the Ashiyatzar after relieving oneself and for the meal. But that, again, we can address in a situation by situation scenario. Halacha number 16. Mi shebe'emtza suda, someone who during the meal naga begufa b'mekomos hamechusim. So we mentioned previously that the person who touches a covered part of their body needs to wash their hands. So what's if during the meal someone touched themselves in a place which should be covered, or shechikech berosho, or someone scratches their head, they're here, or shehishtin mayim, or someone needed to use the bathroom for what we call small things, which is urination. Tzarech lito yodav pam shenis, a person needs to wash their hands a second time. Avalo yivarach aleim, but does not recite the blessing during the meal. V'chein afilu im aset tzrochav, v'notel yodav emsa suuda ein tzarech levarach al netilas yadayim. In such a case, they do not need to recite the blessing of al netilas yadayim again when they return to their meal. Ha'ochel davar shetibulo b'mashke, one who eats any food that is commonly dipped in liquid. O sheba mashke o machal al hamachal, or food upon which liquid was poured. V'adayin hu lach min hamashke, and it is still moist from the food that was poured onto it. It's still wet from it. Even if you're not touching the place of the food that was now made wet from this liquid, nevertheless, you need to wash your hands before eating it. But you do not need to recite the blessing of al netilas yadayim. And many are lenient about this and do not wash their hands before eating such food. But however, a God-fearing person should act stringently about washing his hands before eating. Now, we mention this in our Pesach Seder every year. We say that, right? Because what do? Before we dip the karpas, we dip it in salt water. We wash our hands. We don't recite a blessing, because anytime you eat a fruit or vegetable that's dipped in water, you have to wash your hands. So I'm sure there is a lot of scientific reasons what happens to these foods when they are exposed to water. When they're washed with water, it could be that they have certain. You have to make sure that that your hands are clean. Okay, halacha number 18. Just 4 more halachas in this siman. Mashkin le'inyon zeh shiva. There are 7 liquids that qualify with regard to this halacha. Ve'elohin yayin v'chein chometz miyayin, wine and similarly wine vinegar. Dvash dvorim, bees honey, shemen zayis, olive oil, chalav, milk, ubechlal zeh gam mei chalav, and included in this is whey, which is also included in this category. Tal, dew, dam shel behema chayav ha'of, blood of an animal, beast, or fowl. V'hainu kish'ol chilim l'refuah, but only when this is medicinal, for medicinal purposes. And mayim, and any regular water. And this is, there's a mnemonic for this, which is Yad Shachat Dam, which is the Yud, the Dalet, the Yud for Yayin, the Dalet for Dvash, Shemen, Cholav, Tal, and then Dam of animals and Mayim. Aval, Sha'ar Mei Peros, other fruit juices, Afil B'Makom Shirgin Lasa Mashkim L'Shtia, even where it is common to produce drinks, Mischitas Eza Peros, by squeezing out certain fruits, Ein lahem din mashkel inyan zeh, there is no requirement to wash your hands before. So you have orange juice, you don't have to wash your hands for that, right? Because it's juice, any type of, or if you pour juice, sometimes people will pour juice over a food. Sometimes people pour beer over some types of meats, so like it marinates in it. So that does not fall into the category of liquid that requires washing one's hands before eating that. Okay. Halacha number 19. Kitzur discusses the halachic status of preserves with regard to this law. Perus shemirukachim bitsukar, fruits that are preserved in sugar. Okay. They do not require washing your hands before eating them. Ki hatzukar lo havi mashke, because the sugar is not a liquid. V'gam lachluchis sheyotzem min haperus, additionally moisture that exuded from the fruits, and you have this many times. They have like a little sap that comes out of the fruit. Lo havi mashke, that is not either considered to be liquid with regard to this halacha. Shehu me perus, because it is fruit juice regarding this matter. Aval. However, if they are preserved in honey, then the law is im nikrash hadvash hetev, if the honey hardened well on the fruit. So if you have those apples that they have honey on them, azai yotze b'chal mashke, then it loses its status as liquid, v'nas ochel, and now it's just part of the food. And you do not need to wash your hands for that. Only when it's moist and it's liquidy. Once it hardens, it's not considered liquid, and you do not need to wash your hands on those kinds of fruits or vegetables that are dipped, okay, or moist. Aval im lo nikrushu hetev. However, if the honey did not totally harden, elo nisabu me'at, they thicken somewhat, but they're not completely hardened. V'adayin hem nigarim, they're still somewhat fluidy. Tzrichim netilas yadayim, in such a case, the fruits do require us to wash netilas yadayim. V'chein, likewise, chema shehu b'chlal hacholav, butter, which is included in the category of milk, and the 7 liquids that we previously mentioned. Im hi krusha, if it's solidified, the butter, eino mashke rak ochel, then it's considered to be food and not drink. Aval im hu nimocha hare hi mashke, then it's considered to be a liquid, and in such a case, having butter on any type of fruit, I don't know anybody who does that, but whatever it would be, that would be considered a liquid, and therefore would require one to wash their hands for that. Halacha number 20, dvarim shedarkan la'ochlon, regarding those food items that are commonly eaten with one's hands, below kaf ve'umazleg, that's eaten by hand food, hors d'oeuvres, things like that are hand food that we don't use a fork or spoon to eat with. The halacha, if such a food was dipped in liquid, and specifically regarding fruits, so if you have like these little cut up fruits and vegetables that people don't, for whatever reason, use a spoon or fork, it requires washing of the hands. Aval davar, however, an item she'ein darko lechol rak al yedei kaf, but food which is commonly eaten only with a spoon, kigon levivos v'kayotze behem, such as dumplings and the like. You don't eat that with your hand; you eat that with a spoon or a fork. V'chein peris mirukachim midvash, or fruits that were preserved in honey. B'makom she'ein darko la'ochlon, in a place where it is uncommon to eat them directly with the hands. Rak al yedei kaf mazleg, only with a spoon or a fork. Ein tzarich natil, you do not have to wash your hands for such food, because your hand does not come into physical contact with that food. So yes, you do need to recite a blessing before eating it, but you don't need to wash your hands as if you're washing for bread, like Netilas Yadayim. And finally, the last halacha in Siman 40, halacha number 21, melach shenase mimayim, salt that was produced by the evaporation of water, havi bichlal mayim, is included in the category of liquid water, one of the 7 liquids enumerated above. Kimayim, for water, afal pisha, even when frozen, lo yotze b'klal mashke, they do not cease to be classified as a liquid. Therefore, Hatovel tznon v'kadoma b'melach zeh, one who dips a radish or the like in this type of salt, tzarich netilas yadayim, is required to wash netilas yadayim before eating it. Excuse me. Yain sorof shenase mitvua o miperus, liquor that is produced from grain or fruit, Eino mashkelin yazeh, is not classified as a liquid with regarding to this halacha. Like we mentioned about the beer, once you make it into a beverage that is drunk on its own, makes you drunk too. But a liquor, right? So that is already does not fall into the category of water, even though it's majority water in many sometimes. Well, soda might be, but Eino mashkel inyan zeh is not considered a liquid with regard to this halacha. Delo havi rak zeh min hatvua u'min haperos, for the liquor is considered to be a mere moisture or sweat of the grain or the fruit. Ve'afal pi sheyesh bo gam mayim, even though there is still a lot of water that is in that beverage. Umazuk gam kain b'mayim, and it is also diluted with water afterward. Mikomokim heim hamiut, nevertheless, it is not considered a liquid of water, since the water is the minority ingredient of the liquor. So one of the things I remember when I went on the Kentucky Trail and we went to many of these distilleries, they were all bragging how they have a stream over there of fresh water that they use. We have the freshest water. We have spring water. It comes straight down this stream right to our distillery, and that's the water we use for our beer and whatever, or bourbon or whatever it was that we were looking at. So they have a lot of water that's being mixed in with those grains that are okay. Lochein, therefore, hatovel bo ezed davar ve'ochlo ein tzarich netilas yadayim. Therefore, one who dips any food into liquor and eats it that way is not required to wash netilas yadayim for that. Aval, however, yain saraf shenase min hachartzanim v'hazagim, liquor that was produced from seeds or skins of grapes, o min hashmarim shel yain, or from the lees of wine, nire dahavi mashke, then it could be considered liquid with regarding to this halacha and would require one to wash their hands. So this, my dear friends, concludes Siman number 40. I think even if today there aren't many people that I know that wash their hands for dipping fruits in liquid, it's important to know the halacha. It's important to know that it's there to open up our mind to the intricate details of our Torah. And now we are going to open the floor for Ask Away number 28. I want you to know about 28. 28 is the number of strength. Koach is strength. We are full force ahead in 2026 with all of our questions, with all of our learning, with our intentional Judaism, being focused on doing things intentionally. Don't just do it out of habit. Being intentional Jews. So my dear friend, I'm really excited to begin the next segment of our Everyday Judaism podcast, Ask Away number 28.